Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Diversity in Tech Roundtable. I'm Kit Warchel. I'm the head of content marketing here at Skill Crush, and we're so thrilled that you could join us today. In a moment, I'm going to introduce you to our guests who are here with us. We actually have one more guest joining us shortly. But before I do that, I just want to go over some housekeeping notes because we want to make sure, first and foremost, that everyone can see and hear us. So if you can see and hear me right now, we would love for you to put a comment in the comments section underneath this live video to let us know, just so we can make sure that everybody's getting all of the technicalities out of the way before we get started. The other thing that I wanted to also mention is that we do have this comment section. So in terms of using it, I would love it if each of you would take a moment to introduce yourselves and maybe talk a little bit about why you're here today and what about the Diversity in Tech Roundtable appealed to you. We also have mentioned this several times, but this is a little bit of a unique webinar for us today, in which rather than having sort of a traditional slide deck, we spent the last few weeks asking our readers and our guest readers to submit questions anonymously, which we have then pulled into this roundtable. So rather than kind of lead and plan this sort of beautifully formatted webinar, we've decided to do something that we're calling a roundtable, and it's more like a panel. So I think this is going to be really great for us. But if at any moment you can't hear one of our guests or anything like that, just let us know. And then the other thing that I'd love to point you to is, again, to that comment section. If you didn't submit a question in advance, you can add your questions there. And what we're going to do is take the most popular questions. So if you see a question you love, there's also an option to upvote it. And the ones that get upvoted we'll be answering in our traditional sort of 15-minute Q&A at the end of the webinar. We'd also love to just hear some talking points from you today so that we can think a little bit more about how we do these roundtables in the future and what we're covering. So if you're comfortable, there is a list of questions here to prompt you to join in the discussion. So if you'd like to introduce yourself in the comments and start to get to know the people that have attended this webinar with you, go ahead and tell us why you're interested in breaking into tech or why you were interested in tech before joining the tech industry. And if so, or like if you were, I'm sorry, and does the lack of representation hold you back in particular? Have you had any moments where you felt like the world that you were in was not diverse enough, or where you didn't see people who looked like you or had an experience with you? And also feel free to tell us your biggest concerns. Obviously, there are a lot of concerns around diversity and inclusion, and we want to cover them all, but this is a big, lofty topic, which I have some updates on that at the end of the webinar. But for now, feel free to let us know in there and ask any and all questions that you have for the end of this webinar. Without further ado, I think that we can kind of hop into introducing our guests. So I would love to go around and have each of you just go ahead and unmute and introduce yourselves, starting with Jasmine. Welcome, Jasmine.
Hi, so I'm Jasmine Edwards. I'm the CEO and founder of iSubs. It's a recruiting and placement marketplace for substitutes and schools. And so I was a participant in Digital Undivided's big incubator program. I went into Goody Nation's pre-accelerator program here based in Atlanta. And then now I am a fellow for Camelback Ventures, where we've received 40K in funding. So glad to be here.
Awesome.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Kelechi Anyadziebu. I run programming for our Newark location for Digital Undivided. So I work with a lot of amazing, aspiring entrepreneurs and founders and help them to take their idea all the way up to a scalable, sustainable business. I also come with 5 years experience running my own company. So kind of call myself a recovering entrepreneur, but I ran an online marketplace for African fashion design, and I work with artisans all over the world and helping them to connect with consumers here in the US, Europe, and different parts of the world. So happy to be here and happy to answer any of your questions that you have around entrepreneurship.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jai. I'm founder of The Latinista. It's a network that I developed about 7 years ago, particularly around the upskilling that Latinas and women of color should be doing when it comes to their career. And so every single month we get together and we do professional development workshops. So anything from how to be a confident public speaker to how to negotiate a salary and how to really take responsibility for your internal mobility at an organization. I'm also a career and diversity strategist, and so I help individuals and organizations really understand how to tap into their employees' unique value proposition and their past experiences to be able to amplify everything that the organization is doing and help them uplift the bottom line, because that's what it's all about, ROI, when it comes to these big organizations. I'm so thankful to be here with you all.
So it's my turn now. Can you guys hear me okay? Is it all good? Cool. I'm Preeti Sundaram, and I'm the head of industry marketing at LinkedIn here in London. Before that, I worked at Google, heading up the retail division there. But actually, I don't have any background in tech at all. I have a degree in Japanese studies. I studied Japanese literature and lived in Japan for about 10 years, where I was working a variety of jobs. So doing things like a tour guide assistant and things like that. So for anyone who thinks that they need a background in tech, or they need to be really like code heavy, or need to be able to do these things in order to get into tech, would love to help you guys understand that that's not the case at all. And I'd be really interested to see like what your experiences have been trying to work at tech companies. So yeah, really excited to be here and really excited to speak to you guys. And I'm also really involved. I have been both with Google and LinkedIn about like getting more representation and more diversity of people within tech companies, because that is something that we see as being a real problem. So I'm really excited to talk to you about all of these things and some of the challenges that you guys have had trying to get into tech. So really excited to be here, and thank you.
Perfect. Welcome, everyone. I thought that what we could do to kick things off, we obviously have a diverse group in terms of backgrounds as well. And so I would love if we could just take a little moment to do an icebreaker, and you could each tell us what diversity means to you, or how you would define diversity based on your experiences.
I'll start. This is Jai. For me, diversity really means being able to understand and do a lot of introspective work when it comes to your personal experiences and backgrounds, and also really getting clear about what your value proposition is. And so the fact that we've gone through so much within our lives so far really helps us, enable organizations to tap into our potential and help them help us as a whole community. And so I really love working with people and helping them get clear about what their value propositions are, whether it's personal or professional, and then figuring out how to tie that to the company's mission and vision, how to make, the world a better place, if you will say.
Awesome. I'll go next. I think that when I think about diversity, I really think about creating inclusive cultures. I think that, yes, it's important to have, people who are different when it comes to different demographics. But I think that if the culture in itself is not inclusive, then, things become problematic, right? And so picking back off what was previously said, I think that, it's important that we understand each other's cultural differences, and we try to be introspective and try to also be understanding of where these differences of thought might come from and how it's influenced based on sex, race, gender, or anything like that. And so I think that it really starts from an individual, and having an individual who is willing to really be patient with people, working with individuals who are really willing to understand people, and understand their backgrounds and understand their experiences. And I think that when people are able to be conscious like that, and you have that within, and that's really ingrained into a culture, then I think that that's what really promotes real diversity, because now you're able to intake other people's experiences, right? And really start to think about them in a way that's very different from your own.
I can jump in now. I love that you said, I think it's about creating a workplace that's inclusive. Like, given that I work in quite a traditional workplace and work environment, I think that's so important to have an openness to understanding that our workplaces at the moment, especially in big tech, they don't really reflect what our societies look like. And so just having that very honest reflection and being honest with ourselves when we talk about diversity, and being honest that right now our workplaces don't look like the way our societies look. And then also, I think that's step one. And then step two is really believing that having a workplace that looks like society is not something that's charitable. You know, we're not doing charity by hiring people who look different to us, or people who have different opinions to us. This is not a charity project, but by accepting that the workplace and our businesses are enriched by having people who look different to us, who sound different to us, and who have different opinions to us. So for me, that's what diversity means. It's really two things.
So I'll hop in and say, like, for me, diversity is really like being in spaces that don't have boundaries in terms of who they look for. And I think diversity really, like Kelechi was saying, goes beyond just a certain frame. I think it has to be considered outside of race, disabilities. It needs to be lived experiences, not only educational backgrounds, but how people identify. So there is like, you have to create an inclusive culture at the same time as it being without boundaries, so that if you really want to build a strong culture, you really want to build a strong company that is truly diverse, you have to open up your eyes to see everyone that is in the world, that has the skills, and people that want to join in into companies, and even just within the technology culture that don't fit the typical thing that has been pushed for a while now.
I love that, the idea of diversity being in spaces that don't have boundaries. I think that that's just like the perfect end to this opener. Thank you for that. I think what we'll do now is sort of go over the way that we're going to cover these topics today. So like I mentioned earlier, we did just invite people to submit as many questions as they had around diversity in tech. And of course, like a few of you have mentioned, that is a very large and expansive topic. So we got some really interesting questions in many different categories. And so what we've tried to do is isolate those into some topics and then run through similar questions together so that we can hopefully kind of stay on this narrative path and keep the discussion on track a little bit. So first up, we're going to cover when you're ready to break into tech, where do you start? So we had a lot of questions from our attendees and RSVPs about this idea of, I know I want to get into tech, but I don't know how to even begin getting into tech personally. So we'll begin with that from the personal element. And then we're going into this idea of once you've actually found that job, or you've broken into the industry as an entrepreneur or working for a big tech company like Preeti, like how do you deal with feeling outnumbered or realizing that you're the only one? And I want to give fair credit where credit is due. The concept of the only one, which we mentioned, I think on our landing page, comes from Lean In. So this idea of the fact that it's not just about this lack of diversity, but for a lot of women, they are the only one in their offices, in their companies, in their fields, particularly within tech, whatever that might mean. So what does it feel like to be so isolated that you feel like you have no one to relate to in your company, and what can you do about it? And then next on, we'll go into how can you help bring more diversity to tech in general. So we got some really incredible questions around, I am here and I'm trying to figure out how to make this better for all of us, and what can I do? So questions around mentorship, sponsorship, questions around, what kind of stands we can take, how we can be more involved in the conversation, how we can show up to the table, etc. And then finally, we are going to talk a little bit about resources for finding your community. So a lot of women are feeling very isolated alone based on the questions that we received, and they're having a hard time figuring out how to find other women who want to talk about these questions and work together. So I would love at the end of this for us to kind of answer some questions around the resources that you've discovered in your own careers. Obviously, several of you actually have resources that you've created, and so we're definitely, or you've played a part in creating. So we will definitely talk about that a little bit more in detail before opening up the Q&A. So unless anyone has any questions, I think we will hop into this first step. So you want to break into tech and you have no idea where to start. So we got a few questions on this, and we'll just go ahead and dive into them. And the way this is going to work for our audience and also for our guests is that I'm going to ask these questions, and everyone can hop in wherever they feel comfortable. I'd love to see you know, sort of piggyback of each other if you have additional things to add. This is really about being an open conversation. So we're very excited to hear your thoughts. So first up, let me just read this first question from one of our readers. What are some tips to find diverse and inclusive companies within tech? Could you tell us of companies that would sponsor or hire entry-level positions in the tech field for women?
Do you want me to jump in and answer this one?
Absolutely.
Cool. So how I think about it when it comes to entering tech, and I had this problem too. I didn't have any background in tech at all. And so I think that a lot of people think applying to smaller companies is easier because, you know, they're not as like competitive and like you might get a foot in and things like that. And I think there's one aspect of that that's true. So I think smaller companies do have like a less competitive process. So I would consider like startups and things like this and how you can offer like them some kind of value. But also like more broadly, I think having a job in tech, like my job is digital marketing. So I work in marketing for tech. And so tech companies have so many different roles. So you don't need to be like very technical to work in tech. I'm not a very technical person. I don't do any coding. I have no background in engineering whatsoever. So I would say like think about what it is that you want to do in tech, in a tech company. Do you want to be like an account manager? Because that is not a techie role at all. That is not a tech-based role at all. And what they're looking for there is like someone who can sell and who has like really strong like sales capacities. A lot of tech companies, like the biggest expense for tech companies, the biggest jobs are sales jobs. Like every company, I think about 50% of jobs at Google, Uber, Facebook are all sales roles. So you'll be able to get into that without any background in tech. And there are lots of junior sales roles as well. So you need to think, I would say first about what you want to do in a tech company. Do you want to be in sales? Do you want to be in marketing? Do you want to be in do you want to be in engineering? Do you want to be in product? So think big about like what the different roles are and what opportunities there are for you, and be really pragmatic about it. Be like, these are the types of roles I'm going for, and this is what I can do. And then second, I would say like don't limit yourselves to just small companies. I think small companies are more open to hiring people that don't have experience in tech companies, but large companies like Google and Facebook and Uber, they have tons of like short-term roles and contract roles that are a really great entryway into a tech company. So Google, like 50% of their roles are contract roles at the moment, and they are hiring constantly for these roles in marketing, in sales, all of these departments. And I would say they're a really, really great entry point into tech, and a great way for you to jump into a role at like as a full-time employee in a tech company.
I would add to that, like tips to finding diverse and inclusive companies. You can start like the old traditional way, like get on Google, start to do a search on competitions that have happened. I would say accelerators, incubators, they usually list their participants, and you could do more research on who the founder is, especially if you're like leading into like you want to work for startups instead of like the big Googles and things of that nature. You can do your research, because then like those types of leads and resources usually give you a lot of information on who the founder is, who the team is, and you can kind of see diversity based on the information that they provide. And sometimes they'll be more likely to answer questions or reach out. And for like entering in, especially entry level, for companies that have been funded, they might be more likely to hire remote positions so that you can kind of get your foot in the door. Like for instance, some companies, including mine, I'm hiring contract positions. So it's not full time, but even like contract positions a few hours a week to get you started is also a good way.
All right, unless anyone has anything else to add, and also I'm sorry I lost an internet connection there for a moment, but why don't we hop on to this next question, which is sort of in a similar vein, which is, what guidance would you give to a first generation Latina who is considering breaking into tech? She does not have a college degree or technical background. So she has some reservations about whether she can really do it.
So we covered a lot of this information in the question that was just answered, which is fantastic. I think the only other difference with this particular question is the fact that you're Latina, and so am I. I'm an immigrant. I wasn't born in this country. But one of the things that I would say is certainly look for other Latinas who have accomplished the role that you're looking to attain. And so make sure that your network starts to really embody what you want to emulate. And so when you're on LinkedIn or you're at networking events, make sure that you're reaching out to those Latinas who've actually achieved what you're looking for. The second thing is, because you're Latina, you may have a language skill. So perhaps you speak Spanish or Portuguese. You can actually use that. That's a superpower. That's something that I've been able to use for the last 15 years in every single position that I've held in corporate America. Now I'm an entrepreneur. I've owned my own business for a year and a half, and my Spanish language skills certainly help to differentiate me from everyone else that's going for those similar roles. So make sure that on your LinkedIn, you're focusing your energy on how to differentiate yourself and use that Spanish or Portuguese language opportunity to make sure that you rise above and beyond all of the others. Another thing that I would add is on your LinkedIn page, it's not necessarily that you're only focused on what you've done in the past and your experience, because people can read that where you've worked, but you want to make sure that in your summary section, you're writing down what your goals are, as well as what your call to action and what you want others to help you with. And so if you're looking to break into tech and you have a Spanish or Portuguese language superpower, make sure that you carve that out and you set your intentions. So you're able to say, I'm a multifaceted marketer looking to break into the tech space, interested in opportunities within the New York City area when it comes to these particular industries. That way, when people come onto your profile, they know exactly how to help you.
And just picking off that just really quickly, I think that, navigating, whether you're navigating the tech space or becoming an entrepreneur or whatever you do, I think that, two really important things to have are confidence and community, right? And so I think that as you're going into these spaces, you're navigating these spaces and, just having that real confidence that you have the skills to do this, right? That you belong here. And, while there may be external factors that might make you feel like you don't, or there might be, issues that arise that make you feel like, almost like imposter syndrome or something. I think that at the end of the day, just knowing that you're as smart, if not smarter than anybody else in the room, and having a community that can really validate that for you. And so I think that, having a community of Latina women who are in tech, who, you can talk to, connect with, share experiences with, get advice from, give advice to, I think is invaluable, because at the end of the day, that's a group that truly wants you to win. And, there's nothing like being able to just have that tribe, right, for you. And I think that, it's really underestimated the power that having a real tribe can have, so.
So I think that actually ties in really nicely to the next question. And this came up a little bit earlier, this idea of diversity having there are often areas that we don't even think about that are necessary for the diverse representation in tech. And this is a question we get a lot at Skill Crush, actually, because we often have women who come to us after a little later in life, and they're interested in learning tech skills for the first time. Because perhaps they've taken a career break to raise children, whatever it might be, or maybe they just have found that they're not happy with the industries that they put decades of work into, and they've been drawn to tech for the flexibility and for what we hope is inclusivity. And so why don't we just talk about this for a moment? So How can we better include women who are later in life and or people with disabilities who are often overlooked when it comes to diversity? How can they realistically break into tech? What are the pros and cons?
I think just on the part of how can we better include women who are later in life and people with disabilities, I think it's a larger conversation that I don't think will be solved today, but we have to take off this norm of younger people are in the startup phase or younger people exist within the technology sector. And I think if we continue to push that narrative about anybody can enter. Again, that goes back to diversity and inclusion. That's ageism. That has a lot to do with the technology factor. If we acknowledge it and we have people that are standing on the forefront of it to say you need to be inclusive in that area as well, I think that would be helpful. But it's just something that is a huge problem, definitely right now.
Great. I think we definitely want to spend some more time also talking about mentorship and sponsorship. So let's tackle this next question. What are some ways that I can build my network and find mentors or sponsors in the tech space? And what is the difference between a mentor and a sponsor, in your opinions?
So I can speak just quickly from my experience. I think that for me, the most effective way that I've found to build my network is to ask for help, right? And that's how I really found a lot of my mentors, is to just get really comfortable asking for help. And that was something that when I first started my company, I really, really struggled with because, I had this complex where I felt like I had to know what I was doing. I had to know it all. I had to present myself in a way that everything had to be together. And I think that, people see through that, right? And so I think that as I got more comfortable just leaning on people, asking for help, asking for resources, people emerged that genuinely wanted to help me. From there, just really built out relationships, built out networks, people who they felt like would be a good fit to kind of be in my network. I got introductions to. I think that just understanding where my strengths are and kind of where I lack and kind of where I really need help, and, just having the vulnerability to be able to, show up in a way that makes it so that I'm really building out this community for myself. And I think that, but also in that respect, also making sure that I'm being a resource for other people. And I'm also contributing to this community that I'm building. Because at the end of the day, when it comes to networking, it's all about relationships, right? So the same way that you have relationships with your friends or your family, it's all about just, building out this community of people who you trust and who also trust you.
If I can add on to this and kind of go back, like add to this, the last question as well. I think when you work at a tech company, you realize that it is all about network and it is all about like people that will push for you. So the difference between a mentor and a sponsor is really like a mentor is someone who gives you guidance and who, will tell you how to tackle a particular problem or will tell you how to approach something. Whereas a sponsor is a very common term in tech companies. And this is someone who's really advocating for you to be hired into a particular position or like advocating for you to get promoted. And like you will not get promoted, you will not move positions, you will not get hired unless you have someone advocating for you within the company. That is basically how it works. And I think we probably need to be really honest about it. I think we all, pretend it's like kind of meritocratic and stuff, but actually like it is all about like people sponsoring you and people pushing for you to be hired. And how do you get that sponsorship and how do you get that mentorship? Well, again, like I was not in tech. I was very, very far away from tech. But I think what helped me was that I was part of a ton of groups on Facebook. I live in London, so there are tons of things happening in London all the time, like meetups and like events that are free. And I'm guessing like a lot of people live in like cities like that around the US or around the world where you have these kinds of things that happen all the time. And I religiously attended them. I religiously attended events. I religiously met people, added them on LinkedIn, followed up with them. I think you can follow a ton of people. I really wanted to get into marketing, so I made sure that I followed a lot of marketing leaders on LinkedIn and like saw the kinds of things that they were posting, if they were posting for job opportunities, if they like what kinds of jobs they were posting and what kinds of things they were talking about when they were posting on LinkedIn, because then you immediately know that this is what's on top of mind when it comes to tech leaders, and you're able to speak their language a lot more. So I would encourage you to follow, like write down a list of like 10 companies and find 10 people in those companies that you need to like, you should be following, and follow them. Learn about what they do. Two, like go to meetups, go to events. Like top tech companies constantly have free events. I worked at Google, I work at LinkedIn. We have free events all the time in cities all over the UK and definitely all over the US as well. Attend these events and talk to people, and don't talk to them in a way like, hey, can you help me get hired? But talk to them about like what they do. Talk to them about like what the culture is like, what kinds of things they're working on. Like be interested in them and their role, and ask them to explain to you like what their job is and how it impacts the company's bottom line and what like it contributes to the revenue of that company. So be interested and make contacts. They will also start posting stuff about like, hey, I'm hiring this, I'm hiring for an intern. I see this kind of stuff all the time in my network. So I'd say like really do that. Three, like be really patient with yourself. These things take so much time. They take a really, really long time. So start by doing these things, like learning about who's important, the who's of your industries, talking to them about like what their day looks like. If you get the opportunity to meet them, just connecting with people, getting opportunities on the side. And then like you will get organically people that think you're really like, because you've expressed so much interest in what they do and you're asking really smart, interesting questions, you will be top of mind for them when they're hiring or when they're looking to hire. So I would say like approach it that way. And it does take time. Like it took me like 12 months before I got a role.
That's fantastic advice. Oh, sorry, go for it.
That's okay. I was going to say, I get this question a lot is, how do I get a formal mentor? And what I say to that is, you don't necessarily need to set up a formal mentor strategy or have them sign on the dotted line, as you would say. But I actually have mentors across the world that I've actually never met before. And someone can help you and mentor you simply by replying a few questions via email, or if they have time, on the phone. Whenever I coach people through the mentorship process, I always ask them to ask that particular person that they look up to a number of questions. You know, the first one being, tell me about your career trajectory. How did you get into this role? What did you study? And what are some non-traditional ways that you were able to break into this space? Number two is, what are some books or resources or industry magazines or information that I should be kept in the know about? And can you share some of those? The third one being, who else that does similar work as you in this industry or tech space do you think would benefit me connecting with? And then of course, it's a big responsibility to be a mentee or to be getting advice from someone that you look up to. And so the most important part of having a mentor that helps you through any situation is making sure that you're responsible with the information that they're sharing with you. And so if they're sharing resources, contacts, tools, and books, you want to make sure that you always touch base a month or two later and say, I picked up that book, I attended that conference, I connected with Maria or Bob, and I also went ahead and signed up for this certification or course. You know, and just keeping them in the know about how you're using their information and insight and help and support to invest in yourself in the long run. And when they see that you're doing well with all of the goods that they're handing you, they're going to be able to sort of give you more insight and information, and they'll want to help you over and over and over. And you also have to know what's important for them, so it's a mutually beneficial relationship. You've got to see what value you can bring to them. And it can simply be as easy as making sure that you always send them the IT or the HR or the diversity conferences that are coming up in their area or in their region. And just simply sending them a note and saying, hey, I know that you're in tech diversity or you're in HR and tech. Not sure if you knew about this conference that was coming up, simply sharing, right? And so checking in maybe once a quarter and just bringing value to them so that you're always top of mind as well.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic advice. Thank you. I think that also kind of leads into this next idea. I think we've been doing a lot of talking about how to actually get to the job interview phase. So knowing people, reaching out, being active about it, networking, informational interviews, the whole process that kind of allows you to find the people who will actually sponsor you and bring you into a company. So this question sort of is the middle zone, I think, before you actually make it into tech. And that is, what kind of questions should I ask in a job interview to find out if a company is truly as diverse and inclusive as they claim to be? Does anyone have any thoughts?
I would start off by asking the organization to tell me more about their affinity groups. Within corporations, they're called employee resource groups or business resource groups. And if they tell you they have a business resource group, you want to make sure that you ask them more questions and say, okay, so you've got an affinity group of, say, LGBT employees or women or African American or Asian Indian or veterans or disabled employees. Tell me more about the programming. How often, how engaged are your employees, as well as how much volunteer activity those employees exercise and how often, right? You want them to be able to share really what they're doing in the community and ask them, what professional organizations are you affiliated with? Can you give me an example of a recent program that you all are engaged with or have recently launched when it comes to diverse communities? What is your mission and your vision and your values of the organization? And also, if they tell you they have these affinity groups, see if you can interview or have a conversation with one of those individuals that runs those groups so that you can really hear it from the employees that are on the ground and actually doing the work. That's something that I tell people to do all the time is, yes, you're going to interview with the hiring manager and perhaps a few people from HR, but you want to be able to dive a little bit deeper and say, great, can I talk to other people within the team that I'm going to be managing? Or can I talk to the people in the diversity group? Send me some information on the types of programming that you do and how much money you invest in these diverse communities and for how long. And so those are some questions that I would certainly bring up in a job interview.
I would say like a lot of companies it's a really new area for a lot of businesses. Like this idea that diversity is good it's still something that people are learning about. And like there is a big shift I see in the last like 5-6 years around this, and it was conversations that we weren't having before. So before I was in tech, I worked for a company where this just wasn't a conversation. Like they didn't care, and it wasn't a conversation that was had at all. At the same time, at all the businesses that I've worked at, LinkedIn and Google, it is something that they're really interested in. And if they don't have the answers that Jai, you mentioned, like if you ask them, like, tell me about your resource groups or tell me how much money you're investing in these things, a lot of the time they don't have the answer to that, but they are really open, I found, to you being the person that brings that to the company. So I've said, like, I'm hiring a couple of roles in my team at the moment, and I've said, like, I would really like to hire women and people of minority ethnic backgrounds in this role. Like, would you guys be open to that? And there's been very, very little pushback. People have said, like, that's really great. Like, tell us more about it. How would it work? Like, what kinds of things do we need to put in place to make this happen? So you can also be the agent of change, because I think there is a lot of conversation and a lot of data and a lot of statistics you can use to back up the need for more diversity in companies, which is what I've done. There might be employee resource groups. A lot of big companies have them. Google and LinkedIn have them, but they won't target like every single, type of diversity that you're looking for, right? And so there might be an area that you want to lean into. Something that I'm talking a lot about here is like women of minority ethnic backgrounds. Like, how do we support women of minority ethnic backgrounds? And LinkedIn has been extremely open to me, like pushing the agenda and setting that agenda. But you have to really have a lot of conviction in yourself as well. So I would say, adding on, like, you're really lucky if companies already have employee resource groups and are really open to like hiring employees and have like a really great diversity program in place. I will say to you, like, majority won't, but they are really excited and really keen. I would say, like, there are great people working at companies that just don't have awareness of these issues, but they do know it's important. And so they're happy to let you lead the charge on this as well. So don't be afraid if they tell you, actually, we don't have anything, or actually, I don't know, or no, you can't speak to people, because you can be the agent of change in that company too, which is really what I have been at the roles that I've taken in tech companies.
Great. I think we want to hop on to the next section. We are going to run a little bit long, but we have some questions that are really similar. So I think we can cover a lot of ground in this last 20 minutes. So the next section that we wanted to cover is once you're actually in the company. We had a lot of questions around what to do when you feel like you're the only one, or one of the few women of color, one of the few women who has a disability, whatever it might be. And these questions sort of deal a lot with that. So let's start with the sort of, I would call it the elephant in the room. We got a lot of questions that were very similar to this. So once we do get the opportunity to work for a tech company, how can we make sure we are taken seriously and not feel as if we were just hired to increase the diversity percentage in the company? Does anyone have any thoughts?
This is so tough. I think it's like it's a question that a lot of women and women of color will face when they are in any kind of position, not just in a tech company and not just in a corporate environment. It's been a huge learning lesson, like a learning curve for me. And some of the things that I've learned from this are like, you need to communicate what you're doing all the time, much more than any like man will ever have to do. You'll need to like have a really active approach to being like, hey, everybody, these are the things I'm working on. But you also need to be like really clever about it, because no one hates a self-promoter. Like, no one likes a self-promoter. Everyone hates a self-promoter. So how do you be really clever about it? So something that I've learned is talk about what you're doing, but position it as a collaboration opportunity for the rest of your team, right? So to be like, hey, I'm working on this. Would you guys like to like join in? Who sees opportunities for us to like work cross-functionally? So what this does is really get you to like spread the word about what you're doing in the company. I think that's key. Like right now, I think about how to do that at least like once a month. I'm like, how do I update everyone in the company about what I'm doing and what I've been working on, just so people know that I am working on strategic projects and that I do have a voice and that I am adding value. That is like the biggest like tip that I've learned in my like time in the corporate world, which is that you as a woman and as a woman of color need to be a massive self-promoter, but not in an obvious way, because then people will hate you. Two, you need to also, the way you communicate is really, I think, super important. And before I do presentations and before I present, I make sure, one, I have the opportunity to present. And then two, when I do it, I'm like very, very clear about, I always rehearse what I say. So go for the opportunities to present and go for the opportunities to share, but be really aware of like how you're presenting, be really clear, like put a lot of thought into like how you present yourself and your work. And that's so important. It's so important in a company where there are so many people, and where like you might be the only person. The third thing that I like really love to do is I lean in on like everyone else's diversity. So I like will straight up go to every Black History Month thing, even though it has like nothing to do with like Asian British people. But I will like lean in on everybody's like stuff. I love going to Black History Month because I love like understanding like the challenges that this group is facing and how I can like understand and learn from them. I'll go to like Latin History Month. We had that at Google as well. I love going to these things and really understanding how like you can work together with like groups, other groups in your organization as well. So I think it's like strength in numbers. So you might be the only like Latina or the only like Black person in your company, but if you like combine forces, there's 4 of you, and that's like that will give you like a lot of strength. I know like Black History Month has given me a lot of strength because I see that there are a lot of minorities in my company that like don't look like me, but they also feel like I do, like they feel like the only one. So I would say like those 3 things have been really helpful to me.
I think too, like, just why don't we go ahead and move into the next couple of questions, because I think they sort of are really related to this topic, which is we have one on this slide and then on the next one. But I feel as if I'm always having to prove myself to my mostly male peers that I'm smart enough to have a seat at the table, which you were kind of covering, Phoebe. Do you have any advice to combat this and deal with the microaggressions I'm faced with in the workplace? And then the following question was also along sort of a similar vein, which was, how do you cope with feeling like you have to police yourself as a woman of color, i.e. not wanting to be labeled as the angry Black woman if I get emotional? So these microaggressions. Do any of you have thoughts on those moments?
I do. So for the first one about like proving to your mostly male peers, I think the first step is acknowledging that this issue, like you are not a male, and I think that your job or our job is not to conform to the way that they do things. I think you bring your facts. Every time you come to the table, it's about bringing your facts and being objective. Always have your documentation. The way that they show up in this bro culture where they don't have to have any proof of what they do. People just trust you based on a handshake. And it doesn't work like that for us, right? We have to have our paperwork. And if they say, well, what time did you do it? Actually, I sent it at 9:34 a.m. and it should be in your Slack or it should be in your email. Every single time, and make sure that you're keeping yourself also updated on like your company's published norms, their values, and any paperwork concerning like what you do if you feel like you face any form of microaggressions, right? Because it's important to stand up very early and very fast about how you've been treated so that you're not miserable, and so that people within your company don't feel as if you're somebody that can be tried in that way. And so the first point of contact really is always like your team lead or your manager. And then from there, depending on how your company's rules are, but I would always go to like whoever my manager is. And then from there, if stuff is not still being addressed, move to HR, because you definitely are supposed to be treated well. And that leads in, I'll just answer the second one about like coping. I think that really it's not, like I became aware really late last year that I refused to kind of cope or bend or change myself. The way like you talk, the way that you wear your hair, the way that what you wear is who you are. And you have to be able to live your fullest self to kind of attract the type of people and positions that you want. Because I think the people that you want to attract to get you to the next stage, especially in this technology field, do appreciate people that are bold and that are honest with who they are, especially within the tech industry. And so you won't really survive in this industry if you're constantly coping. Like, how do I get over it? How do I hide myself? I'm not happy. I don't speak up. And self-care is really about leading back into that, is like, how can I be good to myself and not fake the funk? Like, be who you are. Yeah, so that's what I'll say.
Yeah, and like, yeah, I agree with everything Jasmine said. I think that, you really have to be authentic with yourself at the end of the day. You can't bend, you can't feel the need to change or be different because it doesn't matter, right? Like at the end of the day, if Someone is labeling you because of the color of your skin, nothing is really going to change that, because that's an issue with them and it's not with you. So, so there's absolutely nothing that you should feel is, there shouldn't be pressure on you to do that, right? You just have to show up as who you are, and develop those mechanisms when it comes to speaking positively to yourself. Making sure that you have others around you, making sure you have a support system, whether it's husband, wife, friends, family, just other people who are kind of part of your circle who can also kind of go on this journey with you. So yeah, just be comfortable with being who you are and showing up authentically, and not feeling like you have to be something different, because that will never get you the result that you want.
Perfect. We did have a couple of questions around entrepreneurial topics, so I would love for us to cover this before we run out of time. What advice can you share with a non-technical founder in a technical world, specifically navigating the tech landscape and how to seek support, tools, groups, or other resources? And we actually had a whole section around resources, so I'd love for us to spend a little bit of time talking about just resources in general for women who are struggling to find representation in tech or trying to find their community. So if anyone wants to tackle this question first, maybe we can go into more that are more general as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are lots of groups out there for people who feel that exact way, right? Women who want to be founders, and they might not be technical and they want to build tech companies. I think that one of the biggest pieces of advice that I can give to someone who doesn't consider themselves technical is to learn, right? And is to, really make sure that using platforms like SkillCrush, right, that they're at least having a broad understanding of whether it's a tech stack or a platform or solution that you're using to build out whatever it is that you want to build. Because once you have an understanding of how the tech piece of everything works, then you can start to manage tech teams, right? Then you can start to manage other people who are really helping you to bring your vision to life. So, yeah, I mean, I think that when it comes to not being technical, I mean, I feel like it sounds to me there's a lot of fear there. I think that everyone has their different levels of expertise, but at the end of the day, if you really want to be a tech entrepreneur, or you really want to build something that is scalable with technology, then you really have to have an understanding of how your technology works. And so I think that SkillCrush is a great platform for providing you with those initial skills, and then making sure that you're tapping resources as you're building your community of people who can help you, right? So I think it was said earlier around finding different groups on Facebook. There are a million groups on Facebook of just different areas of expertise, whether you're technical, you want to design, whatever you need to do, right? But I think it's important to make sure that you're tapping into these different groups, making sure that you're staying up to date with tech news, you're reading, you're learning. Like, I think that when it comes to entrepreneurship, one thing that I always tell my founders that, as a first-time founder, it's more important to learn than it is to get things right, because that's really what's going to give you that long-lasting, just give you that opportunity to like really build out something that's going to scale. And so, yeah, just taking all the opportunities you can to really understand what you're building out.
I should also add that we'll be, sorry about that.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna add to what Kelechi was saying, everything that Kelechi said, plus just go back to the foundation, the really strong basics of what you're doing as a founder, like have a good idea of what you're building and who you're building it for. you're understanding like their pain points and what they need in order for the pain to be relieved. And kind of once you understand that, while you're kind of in this broad community of the tech space, the more you understand what your customer needs, the more you can hone down on the communities that you need to be a part of and the tools that you need. Even being super scrappy in the beginning, like Kelechi said, using Skill Crush tools to learn how to be scrappy and how to kind of do what you need to do like manually on your own. As you grow, then you'll be able to like onboard a team that you find that has been in your community, and also you'll be able to tell people what you need rather than them trying to figure it out for you.
Great, thank you. I was also going to just add that we mentioned this earlier at the start of the webinar, but we will be including some resource links in our follow-up email, including links to Digital Undivided and the Latinista. So these are all great resources for you, as well as Skill Crush. I love that we got a nice plug there, so thank you to you both. But I also want to mention that we're speaking with you today in part because you are also incredible resources. Some other questions, that we would kind of have sort of breeze past, we will address in the comments section. So if you didn't get your question answered today, I'm very sorry about that. We knew this was going to be a big conversation, and I think this is a sign that we should probably have one of these a month, honestly. So that is something that we'll definitely take into account. And I guess what I would love is to sort of end this on a conversational note with our guests today. So how do we keep the conversation going? And we have some sort of suggestions, one of which is we would love for everyone right now to drop a comment below sharing some of the resources that you've discovered. So if you have an incredible resource that you love using in terms of diversity, in terms of just women and representation, or just even a tool that's helped you as an entrepreneur in tech, whatever it might be, please do share it with the rest of the audience. I think one of the best things we can do is share these tools with each other. Get Paid Slack channel. I don't know if anyone has any experiences using that, but that's a great one that is free and has different Slack channels specifically for diversity and tech and inclusion, but also for salary negotiation, which obviously is a huge element of diversity and the issues with unequal pay in tech. So definitely check that out if you haven't. That's just an idea to kick it off, but I would love for you all to start dropping some suggestions in there. And we'll actually include some of those links in our follow-up email as well to some of the most popular upvotes. So please do it. And then the last thing I wanted to mention in terms of a resource for you is that we're very excited to announce the launch of our Diversity in Tech survey today. So in addition to the resources and the links that you're going to receive in the replay link in your inbox in a couple of hours, you're also going to get a link to our new Diversity in Tech survey. We would love to have you fill it out. It's quite long, but you can choose how many sections you want to fill out. We'd love for you to do the full thing. And the idea behind this is that we want to get an idea of what women are experiencing right now as they try to break into tech, and how companies can actually work with them better to make the experience of breaking into tech more successful for women in all sorts of communities. So definitely take a look for that, and we would love to have you fill it out. And so share it with your friends as well. The one last thing I wanted to mention is that it's a big, bulky email. We hope that you'll love it. But the other thing that we're doing is we're also offering you a big discount on one of our Skill Crush course packages. So the idea behind this is sort of what we were talking about earlier, that learning the tech skills is going to give you what you need to kind of move forward in this quest to join more tech industry companies, and we have the tools for that. So we're offering, for a limited time only, a 15% off discount on our Break Into Tech course package. You can head straight to this URL if you're excited enough to sign up today. We also will send the link to you in that follow-up email as well, and you'll use the code DIVERSITY. This is one of our biggest sales on our Break Into Tech course packages, and it's important for us to give a discount that felt substantial in the situation. So please do consider it. And please let us know if you have any questions about that. But we hope that you'll consider it, because the more tech skills and the more women with tech skills, the better. And I think that that kind of brings us to the end of the webinar. I would love to just thank our guests. So thank you for being here. And thank you for taking the time to talk with all of the people currently watching this webinar, but also the people who are going to get that replay link in a little bit. We really appreciate you talking so openly with us.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you all.